We did an experiment the first year we grew CBD just with bees, because we always have bees on our place. And so we had bees on one place, and that come up is, hey, you're going to get seeded because of those bees. And so we had two other farms that was 12 miles away that didn't have bees, and you could never tell the difference in the seed.
Welcome, everybody. I'm really excited to be live. I'm excited to introduce Toby and Kirk, one of his partners from Western Ag Works. You're in Colorado, right, Toby?
Correct.
Okay, nice. If you don't mind, I'm giving a quick introduction. And then for those of you that are listening, please feel free to chime in, ask any questions as we move forward. But other than that, take it away, Toby. I'd love an intro.
Okay, I'm Toby McCracken from Western Colorado. We're on the western slope in a little valley here it's small, got a lot of water, and that's pretty much, we process seed, we do fabrication, and that's where we're at.
Okay, so where in Colorado? I've got family over in Colorado, like the Loveland, Fort Collins area. How close are you there?
We're about 200 miles. We're on the western slope, so we're 50 miles from Grand Junction south.
Okay, nice. How much hemp it was grown in Colorado? Like, what's your market like over there?
This year was way down. Previous years, there was I think they said there was over 2,800 acres here in 2019. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure just from what I know that was growing here.
Yeah.
So it was a pretty big area for hemp.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about your background. How'd you get into the hemp industry, and what do you guys, I know you're processing seeds, but why processing seeds? Why'd you get into this?
Well, so it all started, I had a equipment dealership here, just a little one. We just traded little equipment, farmed on the side. My dad had a machine shop downtown, built specialty equipment for onions to sweet corn seed, to just about everything that was growing here. And I had a customer actually stop by when the hemp was really hot and heavy here, and that would have been in 2018. He stopped by and said he was going to grow some hemp. He would like somebody to come set up drip systems and stuff. And I said, well, we have a drip system, but I don't really want to set it up. I don't want anything to do with this. And so we went on about our way, and 2 more days he showed back up. And he said, please help me. I can't find anybody to help. So we said, okay, let's go up there. So we went up and set it up. And of course, he was like everybody in the hemp industry. When it first started, nobody was ready. I mean, everybody was in a frantic attack to try to get it planted that year, here anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So he said, well, can you lay plastic? Can you plant it? I said, I cannot plant it, but we do have a plastic layer. We've done vegetables here. So I said, yeah, we can send a crew up. We'll lay the plastic just like we do the vegetables. So we went and done his vegetables. He got a crew to come in there and plant it. And then we ended up babysitting the crop for the rest of the year with him, trying to help him through it. And that's when it all kind of started. He come and he said, I need you to rent me a warehouse to start hang drying plants. And I said, whoa. I said, that's too much for us. Labor is a hard issue here because we grow a lot of onions. And the labor issue, when the onion guys are ready, the labor's all taken. You can't get labor.
Right.
So we got to figure out something, because you're not gonna find the labor unless you already have it for the year.
Right.
So that's what put us on the journey that we started.
Okay.
That's kind of how that all started. But my grandfather had worked for the Alice Chalmers dealer back in the 50s here, and then my dad had opened the machine shop in 1990. So we was kind of always in the farm ag fabrication.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about your equipment and where'd you go from here?
So what we did when we had decided there was a few little bucking machines around, but they was really, really small. So that year we decided to start trying to build a bucking machine so that because we knew we wasn't going to get a self-propelled harvester done.
Okay, can you, for those that don't know, what does bucking mean? What does the harvesting process look like?
Okay, so somehow you got to strip the flower and the bud from the stem. Mm-hmm. And at the time, that's feeding, going out there and cutting it by hand or a chainsaw or whatever, and feeding it through these small little rollers.
Yeah.
So
I've been out where they've harvested, where they drill holes in a piece of wood and they manually, one person on each side of the piece of wood, buck the stem, right? Take the flower off and send this long stick with buds on it through and manually pull it off into a bucket. And the labor intensive, holy moly. And I still think, like you said, it wasn't considered. These farmers that went out that are used to harvesting anything, I don't think considered the labor that went into it, right?
Right. So we had ended up building 2 big bucking machines, and they worked fairly decent, but we said we still have to have the labor here. We still got the issue. You got to have somebody feeding the bucking machine all the time. So we're right back to square one. We got to change. And at that time, I actually had a prototype of our dryer that we was working on another project. So I said, well, you know what? Let's buck it and let's see what the difference is of drying time with the stem, without the stem. And so we got to use a dryer that year. So our drying time was substantially less. We didn't have the labor in the drying, luckily.
Which then saves on your storage, right? Because storage has been a massive concern for people, this hang drying. Once you cut your crop, then it has to be hung dried or treated, whatever that process looks like. By the way, I'm really impressed by your equipment. I've shown it to an incredible amount of people because it makes sense. It solves a pain point that we've had for a long time.
Thanks. So what we did is I had not been around hemp. So he actually, he was growing autoflower because he was so late. He said, let me fly you to Oregon. And we went to Ashland, actually, and went to a farmer, a good friend, and got to see his crop. And that's where we was out there and we're screwing around with his plants, and pretty quick he's like, of course at that time hemp was worth a lot of money, and he says, hey, quit pulling off all of my buds, you're starting to cost me a lot of money. So I said, okay, I'll stop. But that's where it all started up there. Is I told him at the time, it was Mike Meyer, he's one of our partners, and he said, you got away. I said, let's go back home now. I think we have it. And so we come back and started on the drawing board and ended up making just a single standing one, and actually had the Expos International people come out and they said, yeah, we should do this. And so we the very first year, the prototype one we had, we just harvested about 500 acres of hemp right here in the valley, and Expo was involved, and Expo would have stayed, I think, but for them as an international company, the hemp industry didn't have it was real wavy. They was scared because it wasn't leveled out.
Sure.
And so we kind of decided, and they decided both, that we would just start building them ourselves. And so we bought them because they supplied the material for the prototype. So we bought them out of our prototype because we own the patent. And this year we started building them in-house.
That's awesome. So how many do you have built now?
Right now we have 5 in the field, and okay, we've got 2 in the shop right now being built. We've got, this year we're releasing hopefully 20 single row. We've only had 3 row machines out. But now this year we're focusing on smaller farmers to get them 1 rows out. And we also have probably going to release 5 to 10 greenhouse versions. So if you're growing flower in greenhouses and need one of these, it's a stationary one that can sit there and you actually kind of feed it by hand, but it'll be for greenhouse people too.
Okay, so it's way much more time efficient. I love what you have. I think one of the biggest concerns that I see in the industry is the crop that lays on the floor and then is going into a consumable product, and yours keeps everything right off the ground, right? I have a video I'll show, but can you explain to me, like, what's the volume it can process, harvest? What are you looking at? How does it work?
I mean, if all conditions are right, I think you could do 40 acres a day. We've done it before, but conditions was perfect. On the average, we have a Canada grower. He got 22 acres a day in a really heavy crop. And so he was really happy that he could get 22 acres a day, because even with the dryers, he was overloaded because it was a really heavy crop.
Right. So when I'm going to show this video, I have 2 different videos, but I want to show it for listeners. And so you can kind of explain it, because I want to understand. When you did this, what were the pain points, the harvesting time, but what were other concerns you heard from farmers when it came to the harvesting process, right? The drying also became a big concern. And we didn't really talk about, what does your dryer do in addition to the harvester?
So one of the biggest things is that, and we seen it ourselves, because the first year we had a dryer in a building, and it was working so good that one of the neighbors here had come by. He had it was in late October, 1st of November. It was raining. He said, "Look, my crop's laying in windrows on the ground. Can you help?" I said, "Well, it's not going to dry out there, so the best thing you can do is haul it to us and let us try." We're not used to doing it this way, because. So what he ended up doing is he hauled it in there and we dried it on the stems. It took a lot longer, but we dried it on the stems. And then we ended up, I said, "I don't want to hand buck all this." This was like 20,000 pounds. I said, "I'm not going to hand buck all this." So we actually set a combine up, because we wanted to try all different aspects anyway. So we set a combine up there dry. And we got about halfway through, and I said, "Guys, look at the cab of the combine." I said, "I don't know a lot about hemp, but I said, when I got my hands on there, now they're so sticky that I can't touch anything." So I said, "That's got to be all the oil sitting on top of the cab of the combine instead of in the bag. So we can't go down this." So the trichomes was a big deal for us, that we knew you have to bucket wet to try to consolidate and keep all your trichomes that you can, because you're always going to lose some. Somehow, every time you touch it, you're going to lose something. It's going to degrade. So we said, we got to do it when it's green. And so then we knew that we had to go with what we had.
Yeah.
And that was one of the big deals, trichomes.
I'm going to show your video really quick so that people can kind of see what this looks like. Cool. So tell me, what's the, once it goes up into the, I don't even know terminology. Can you kind of explain, as it's running through the field, it's actually stripping the stalks and leaving the stalk in the field, right? And then what happens to it?
So you're actually, you're stripping the bud from the stalk, and you're going to get leaves too. That goes into a conveyor back up into the dump tank. Then we have live bottom trucks that are belted bottoms. We dump into them and go straight to a warehouse. And then we always tell our customers, if they buy the harvester and dryer, we tell them, look, we would get a 15-foot sorting belt, because you're going to get a few stems. There's just no way about it. And so if you want a really clean product, we say, okay, dump it on that belt. You have 3 people, and they can sort out any stems that you have. And then you can dump right into your dryer bins. Onto the dryer it goes. And like our dryers are all food grade bins. So once it goes into the bin, you never touch it until it's ready to be bagged. So the less times we move it, the better off we are.
Right. So then the dryer, tell me about the drying process. There's a lot of people that are just hang drying it in these massive warehouses. There's some that are using heaters or, air dryers. Tell me a little bit about yours. What is it?
So ours is an air dryer. Yeah. We use extremely low heat. This is where the seed industry helped, is that we was in the seed industry too, not in hemp, but in vegetable seeds. And degradation on germination of seeds starts at anything above 90 degrees on seeds. So if you're drying, say, sweet corn seed above 90 degrees, anything, the higher you go, so 95%, you start degrading the germination. You might have had 90% germ when you come in there and dry it at 96 degrees. You're going to have an 82 or 85% germination rate in the end, because it degrades. And we noticed, we did that study in our own dryers, that we noticed every time we got higher and higher from 90 degrees, we started having more and more problems. So we said, okay, we got to stay at 90 degrees. We just have to have extreme amounts of air, but not too much air to where when it's dry, you're blowing trichomes off. So, and then being in the vegetable business, we knew everybody, this is going to become food grade from one step all the way. And it's headed faster than we think. So we said, we have to be in the food grade version too. We cannot have something that's going into a steel bin or anything like that. We're going to have to go into food grade. And so all of our smaller drying bins that set on our plenums are all food grade.
Okay. Well, and I'm with you. That's so critical. Even moving in the fiber industry, it's a lot of conversation that the crop hitting the floor is a real problem for them, from mold to anything else that's picked up on that field, right? So moving from the non-hemp industry to the hemp industry, right? What were some of the biggest advantages being in the seed space previously? Where do you really see opportunity?
Well, I mean, a lot of it helped a lot, because in the seed industry, I guess I knew the seed industry, you got to be very delicate with it. And Oxbow has a really good tractor, so I was always close to Oxbow because we use them in the seed industry. They're very gentle. They use everything as conveyance. No augers, no paddle chains, nothing like that. Everything's a belted. So when it flops on that belt, rubber belt, it conveys it off. So you're not moving the material or pushing the material or anything. It's actually moving on a conveyor.
Okay.
That helped. And then knowing what degradation happens, the temperature, that really helped in the dryer part, because it's practically the same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, you're so close, it's not even funny, because we did our own studies and we went from 90 to 98 degrees, 99 degrees. You could tell the difference. When we did our tests, you could tell you would lose 1% to 2% just by drying it higher, and the higher you went. So some of these I see some dryers maybe 120 degrees, 140 degrees. They say it's not, but when you get closer to the burner, it actually is. Ours do not directly blow flame-driven burner, right? We have secondary fans that pull warm air instead of, instead of blowing it through a burner straight in. So we have a secondary chamber, is kind of how to explain it.
What's the size of a facility that would be needed to use a dryer like yours compared to what most people are using now?
Well, I mean, like one of the footprints that I think you have a video of the dryer that's in the video is 100 feet long by 8 feet wide. So we tell everybody, not necessarily do you have to have an enclosed building. If you have a roof over, just so if it rains, these are made to be outside. That's why the food grade bins, I mean, you can steam clean it, you can do whatever you want. And the nice thing about the dryer is each bin you can track. We put tag holders on each bin, so you can track if, say, you're a custom dryer and you got 5 people in a co-op, you don't have to shut the dryer down because you're switching to a different lot. You can actually you'll just maybe have one bin that's a quarter of a bin on the last one.
Right.
And you just change different tag numbers and the way you go.
Just push it through. That's really cool. So who are the majority of people that you're working with or that are coming? 2 questions. First, if I'm a small farm, can I bring product to you to dry, or can you process, or is it on a purchase only?
Kirk actually has some dryers. I think he does a little bit of custom drying.
Okay.
Me myself, no, I'm so busy with we do have a dryer here, but we use it mostly for the seed. But I mean, I guess if we needed to, we could.
Sure. Well, and I was just curious. And then, so for those of you that are looking or have questions, Kirk's contact information is at the bottom of this screen, kirk@westernagworks.com. Feel free to reach out to him. Feel free to call me if you guys have any questions as well. But yeah, it's pretty awesome. So talk to me about cost. If somebody's looking to get involved, what's the cost? If I have, say, 20 acres, what's a cost? Or at what point is it cost effective for me to buy my own equipment at scale? Yes.
So that's one of the problems that we had. So the big machines are 3 rows, and the tractors, a good used one's going to run you 80 to 100,000.
So this is a piece that fits onto existing equipment.
Yeah. So it's the chassis. This is what we use for the chassis. It's an Expos.
Yeah.
The header is I think they're priced right around $230.
Okay.
So that was one of the problems that we had is, okay, 20 acres, how do we figure out that this is going to be cost effective? And that's why we're releasing the 1 row this year, is because now anybody that has less than 50 acres, we're telling them, hey, look, it might take you a little longer, but the 1 row, you're going to save a lot of money. We have them so where they fit on skid steers, front end loaders, like a John Deere tractor with a loader. You have to have a version with a loader. And as long as they'll, we have to look at lift capacities, but you can fit it on a lot of machinery that people already have. And so that 1 row really is going to help. Now, if you're 50 to 300 acres, we tell you just need to go to the 3 row, because that way you have the capacity just to go. I mean, you don't want to be 2.5 months and hit the end of the frost and going, hey, you said that this would go really smooth.
Right. So tell me, how many, on average, your customer size, what's the acreage you're seeing being grown for people that are using it?
It's shocking because we have quite a few customers in Canada, and they're really big up there, 200 to 500 acres. Down here, we've got quite a few 100 to 250, but that's kind of where it ended up. I didn't see very much larger farms than that. And a lot of little ones. We had a lot last year. We had probably 10 calls that was 10 acres and below around here. that was asking, hey, can we rent one of these? I said, well, the only 3-row that we have is leased out. We let somebody lease it as a demo, and I can't, we only have one.
Yeah. Well, I imagine that especially on these smaller farms, well, and let me ask you, do you think these smaller farms are going to be continuing to grow for flour and biomass?
I believe they will. I mean, I see it kind of, I guess I see it in the farm perspective that it's kind of like the onion business. We see it all the time. 3 years, we dump them. We ended up not even making money. It's just like a wash. And then all of a sudden, the 3rd, 4th year, we have a really good year. And I see that. I still think that hemp will end up that way. We'll have where nobody wants to plant it, and then there'll be an overrush, and nobody will have it, and it'll be a big circle.
Well, and that's kind of what's happening in agriculture in general right now, right? I mean, with this pandemic, and I was listening to something the other day that was just really hit me in the gut. It was a podcast about what's happening on the supply chains. You know, when we shifted from restaurants being open and all of this food and supply chain being shipped to restaurants, and now, you know, we can't just ship the cattle or the, you know, pigs that used to go to restaurants now into grocery stores. The supply chains aren't set up to just make that adjustment. And so now we have an overproduction of beef and pork and, you know, these other commodities. And then now what happens is next year, you know, those farms lose out so badly. And next year they're not going to be producing the volume they were due to a number of reasons. And so now we're going to really pay on the consumer side in the next year or two as we don't have production, right? And so I agree with you when you say, like, you really see this cycle in agriculture in general, but hemp specifically. And I just don't think that the majority of consumers are aware of how impactful our agricultural is, that, you know, the support and the need for it.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of farms. We have one farmer here that sells sweet corn, and he does it not only in our valley, but he does it all the way across the nation. And I had a big talk with him because he's trying to get into the food safety and everything, and asked anything we could do to help him. And he was telling me a story of sweet corn in Texas that they was selling when the pandemic really hit hard last year in January and February and March.
Yeah.
That there was, you know, they had dates that the corn's planted and it's only ready on that day. And literally the grocery stores would call up and say, we don't need it today, sorry. And so there may have been 50 acres picked that day. The farmers was actually just dumping it.
Yeah.
And so those guys went down in acreage.
I am more taken back by how broken the supply chains are and the lack of need or focus to the supply chains until now. You know, on an example of that, people are starving to death in the United States due to this pandemic, and we're burying truckloads of pig and cattle and beets and corn because there's no place to put it before it goes bad. And that's the part that just, I mean, we're struggling, right? So
yeah, and I mean, we see it in the hemp industry. I mean, truthfully, look, when we've done studies on this, if you leave the flower for over a year and don't have actually cold storage that has no light and that stays a constant temperature of 50 degrees, it's gonna lose CBD, and then actually people say it even turns into THC. Now, I don't know how true that part is, but I know for a fact that we've tested some of ours and we've left some in the shed just to try it, you know, one bag, and it had lost 2%, 3%. And it doesn't sound like that big a deal, but when you turn into the mechanical part, a lot of times you're 7 to 10% CBD. Well, a lot of these extractors now say, well, anything under 7, we won't even mess with it.
well,
But we want everything above 10.
Yeah, at that point, it's not cost effective to extract on a lot of these processes. I think as new processes come in and you see, like water extraction or these non-chemicals, but man, ethanol is extremely expensive, especially during the pandemic. Like it is not readily available.
Yeah, I don't think I'd want to be buying it during the pandemic.
No, and so yeah, there's definitely a lot to be considered. I have run across, and I'll have to connect you, but a gentleman that has these bags that are active bags, and they have studies up to 2 years where the terpene profile actually increases, and CBD has stayed consistent for 2 years inside these bags. But they are supposed to fight mold, and he kind of laughed. He said, "But we can." We can fit a semi truck inside some of them, so they can be made in multiple different sizes to carry. But maybe a great offer, especially for these big farms, right? Is there figure out the processing?
We actually helped one big outfit. We tried to set them up. It's kind of like they did in the apple business. We said, look, you got to pull the oxygen out of the air, and they always put apples to sleep, and that's how they used to store apples. Is they would take the oxygen out of the air. And that's probably what those bags do, I would imagine, is you suck the oxygen.
It's got to be, and I don't know, but somebody asked me if they're putting nitrogen in it or if it's, but I really have no idea. And I don't even want to speak incorrectly about them because I'll probably give them a bad name. But I was really impressed that they have, consistent studies for a long period of time that I think would save some of these farms, especially as we're just trying to move into figure out what is the most cost-effective and efficient processing, for it. Talk to me a little bit about what you guys do for seeds. How are you involved in the seed market for hemp and or cannabis?
So Kirk does a lot of the hemp seed. We have a facility here that we can clean just about any kind of seed, and that's, literally. We're working on some contracts. The reason for it here in this valley is hemp was a huge thing here, and it really drove the community. There was work everywhere. Well, then when everything slowed down, everything took the brakes, and now these farmers are standing there going, "Now what do we do?" Because they're at a loss. When their cattle ain't worth nothing. It's hard you can't produce feed for cattle when cattle ain't worth nothing. So our little valley is very unique because we have to pay freight to get it here and freight to get it out of here because we got mountains on all four sides. So it's a really hard place to live because you truck everything, you pay for it in, you pay for it out. And that was one of the things about the seed is that getting more of these seed producers in here because we have a really unique climate. We have the cold nights, but we have warm days. And a lot of people would know Olathe sweet corn. It was very popular. And there's been seed developed here. The Olathe sweet corn was developed here. So we have this facility that we can clean just about anything. We can process hemp seeds. We actually treat organic hemp seeds. We got an organic treatment for hemp seeds to help because practically there hasn't been a lot of research done on the disease side. We've seen it here in Colorado really bad. In 2019, we had a lot of I wouldn't call it I would call it emergence trouble. So it would come up, but we would lose a lot of plants, the disease.
Well, oh, okay.
And a lot of people don't know, but a lot of it was what they call pythium. And it's a form of root rot, I guess is how I would explain it. But there's some organic treatments that you can put on it that help fight it and at least get the plant up and running. We've done a lot of research here. We've done a lot of research on my farm because practically there's not been a lot of talk about hemp is a very tough plant. Very tough plant. a lot of people don't see it that way. We actually planted some and overwintered it. And we have pretty harsh winters. I mean, last year we had -5 degrees, -2 degrees for about a week, and then we warmed back up. But we stay down 20 degrees. We actually planted some in November, and we had a phenomenal crop.
Okay.
And it overwintered. So we planted it the year before in November. It came up, and we was off and running. And the unique thing about that is you beat the disease.
Okay. Is that because it freezes because the cold?
Well, the only thing that we're really trying to figure out why they did so good. But one of the things that we keep falling back, the farm that I went and looked and seen at Ashland, Oregon for the harvester, actually he told us something really neat. He says, before you plant your hemp seeds, put them in a freezer. And I never could figure that out, but there's something to that, because he always put his in the freezer before he planted it. Because I mean, I'm sure he planted cannabis before, and so he had the cannabis side, and he said, "Look, we always put it in the freezer, and it worked."
Okay.
And so the only thing that I can see that I could wrap my head around is that the shell of the seed is so hard that you need something to get that kind of crack.
Sure.
So it's not as hard, because when you get a really good hemp seed and try to crack it with your fingernail, you can't hardly do it.
Right.
And that's one of the problems that we've seen here is, so if you direct seed, you have to get it so wet to get that seed to swell and to break that outside shell, that now the more water you put on it, everybody knows that, the more disease you got coming up. And so I guess that's one thing about the winter is it was natural.
Sure.
Naturally
it
occurred.
Makes sense. Yeah, it's just fascinating. The more people that I interview, I mean, there have been a number of people that have grown, fairly good sized crops, 10+ acres with no water at all.
Well, that was the winter crop. We actually irrigated it because we wanted to see how far we could push it, and we only irrigated it 4 times all year. So it conserved a ton of water for us, because we were short this year here anyway.
Right. Well, and it just goes to show it's a hardy crop. So when you were planting, were you planting the, I guess in hopes, the female seed, high resin for CBD? You weren't planting for fiber, right?
No, we planted for biomass is what we was going for. We don't have enough labor to do the flower part, so we just went for the biomass just to try it. We wanted to see, and it actually it was up in February of last year. It was about a ½ inch tall in February.
So cool. So tell me, what's the market look like for biomass, right? I mean,
to be truthful, I have not watched it that close. I hear a lot of stories from around here from, like $2 a pound, but I kind of quit following it because sometimes it just discourages you, and then you get the wrong thing in your head thinking, well, man, we don't want to build 20 of these harvesters, and then the market changes, and then all of a sudden everybody's low on biomass. We don't really watch it.
Right. Yeah. It's been gut wrenching to watch for people. It's hard. And it's hard when I get on these, because there's a number of people that watch that just can't sell their farm. They can't get rid of it. And just like you said, the longer it sits, it just loses value very, very quickly. So it's got to be processed or preserved somehow. And so it's pretty hard.
I think that's what the industry needs, isn't it? It either needs, somebody like with these bags.
Yeah.
It needs, that's one of the key ingredients. You got to get it to where you can conserve it and sell it at a later time. So you're not fighting with the farm commodity. The whole problem with the farm commodity, that you're just stuck with whatever you get because you got to get rid of it.
Right. What's the most of the people that are processing that are using your equipment, working with you, are processing for CBD, or do you have quite a few people that are growing for seed, or is it a dual crop, or what are you seeing?
Most everybody that we've dealt with so far has been for CBD. We do have we actually have a cannabis group that's going to grow big acreage that are talking about a harvester, and I think they're gonna end up buying a harvester. It's just when they do, they're in the process now.
Yeah, awesome. So with seeds, if somebody wants to get in touch, do they bring seeds to you and you can wash and treat them, or?
Yeah. So what they need to do is call Kirk, and then Kirk will get them in touch with the seed plant manager. Is actually my brother Jimmy. So
cool.
he takes care of everything in the seed. He's been in the seed industry since 1996, 96 or 98.
Seeds are just one part I haven't. I mean, this, to be honest, this whole piece is just not something I know very well. I've spent a lot of time in the post-processing and secondary processing, the extraction and so forth, but not a lot on the in-field, the harvest, right? What it looks like and so forth. Do you guys see yourself moving into fiber at all?
At some point, I really think the fiber is a big deal. I mean, we've kind of looked into it. It's just, I don't want to jump too many hoops. We've kind of protected at what we do good, and we're kind of trying to stay there. We are working with a seed fiber. We've been having talks with a seed fiber place about cleaning their seeds and treating, and actually we have a storage facility here for seeds that stays at 50 degrees with no light that they always used. For one example, they had sweet corn in there for over 14 years, and it had lost 1% in germination. Wow. So we have a really good seed holding facility here.
Toby, I think that's where it's not spoken about very much. We don't talk about the seeds very often, right? We're not talking about, I mean, where are we getting the seeds and what's working? And a lot of these other countries are leaps and bounds much further ahead of us at knowing what to plant. But as we have there's some big acreage that's going to be grown even on the fiber side, or especially on the fiber side, as these processing facilities are going in, and different test crops for different, big buyers, right? Automotive, construction, textiles, some big players, plastics. I would be interested in diving into the seed piece a little bit more and what that looks like, and some things that farmers need to be aware of when they are purchasing seeds or looking into seeds or storage of their seeds. And
it's kind of it's a neat deal that a lot of people don't understand. That so say you're growing fiber seed for people. The talks that we've had, you have to have a 4 mile isolation, which means you can't have a hemp crop within 4 miles of you of any kind. There's a big issue with isolation so that you don't cross contaminate crops and have it pollinated from something else.
But what do you do? This is something that comes up, because I bring this up. I'm like, what do you do when here we have these organizations that are promoting Save the Bees and finding out bees are very beneficial for hemp? I mean, and 4 miles is not very far for that bee to travel to cross-pollinate a crop and destroy, almost ruin a CBD crop if you've got
So I think it's misconceived that I really don't, because we've dealt with this in the seed industry, and like sweet corn seed, we grew a lot here. At one time in this facility that we're at, they grew over 600 acres of seed in 1 year and processed it. And bees get on corn pollen,
right?
But not out of all those years, not one crop did they have that that was cross-pollinated from a bee, it would be you're more apt to get cross-pollination from wind or too close.
Okay, that's good to know, because that's something I really am concerned about out of protection for, what are things we need to be discussing with counties for zoning.
I know we did
Who's there first?
we did an experiment the first year we grew CBD just with bees, because we always have bees on our place. And so we had bees on one place, and that come up is, hey, you're going to get seeded because of those bees. And so we had two other farms that was 12 miles away that didn't have bees, and you could never tell the difference in the seed. We got seeded anyway because there was a couple different male female fields in the valley, and we got seeded anyway. But you could never tell the difference when you'd pull a bud apart and count all the seeds in it. There was no difference. So I don't know how much the bees really have.
Yes, I'm really, really glad to hear this, because it's something that, I'm passionate about the bees. I would love to see the bees, be used or available or put in the middle of hemp fields. But yeah, I understand what you're saying. And it is a zoning concern that I think comes up that eventually we'll have to figure out. I don't.
Yeah, there's really good, I know of two really good plant breeders that actually come from the vegetable seed that are now in hemp and that are very knowledgeable. And I think we're going to see that more and more, that these guys, this guy has over 30 years of experience in plant breeding and is a top plant breeder. So I think we're going to see more of that really bring a lot of experience, that can say, hey, we've done these vegetable crops like cucumbers, and we could have got cross-pollinated from the cucumbers in people's garden. But I mean, they can explain a lot of that stuff.
Right. And that's what's cool, is this industry expands. We're pulling other verticals, into the hemp industry, or putting hemp into their industry. And so we really are going to see more and more expertise, because we're not a standalone industry, where hemp is something that integrates with all of these other industries. It's not like,
yeah, it really needs to. I mean, we've seen it really come alive when it's not just everybody's figuring out everything for what they have to, because nobody's out there to ask.
Right. Well, and that's really where my goal has been, is to create a platform where people can come together and find resources like yourself and say what works and what doesn't work, and when did you do this, or why did you not do this? And so I invite you guys. I'm really excited that you guys are sponsoring. I'm really excited you guys are involved. I'd love to continue to push contacts. Can you explain something real quick? Because I'm not sure that, for me, it was a little bit eye-opening when it was put into perspective for me, that when I walk into a grocery store and I buy something off of the shelf, I know what's in my bottle. I know that it's by standards within the United States, meets those certifications or those standards to protect the consumer. And I'm able to look at the bottle and know what's on it, right? With CBD or hemp, that doesn't really exist yet, right? So when we talk about food grade facilities, why should people be paying attention? And I mean, because there's a lot of people that are wanting to jump into this industry, and that's not even something considered. I mean, they're harvesting in the middle of a field, and yeah.
Well, I think here's one of the biggest deals, and I think this is what hurt the hemp industry the worst. And I really regret we let it go like this, is that the first 2 years, there was a lot of people that was selling CBD oil that, hey, I tested it myself and there was nothing in it. It had very little CBD oil. So that consumer takes it and goes, hey, that didn't do nothing for me. I'm not going to go pay $30 a bottle for that thing again. It didn't do anything. But yet really, all it did is hurt the hemp, because it actually does work. I've seen it. That was one of the things that opened me up. Is I'm a big kids person. We donate tons to the schools here. And Mike Meyer, the partner that took me on this journey, his granddaughter had autism. And it ended up, they got her on a really good regimen of CBD He went to California, to Berkeley, got the CBD regimen, and now she says the word "I love you," and she never could before. She never hugged a teddy bear. She never hugged her, and she actually got nose to nose with her grandpa for the first time, and actually had, you know, you could tell she loved him, and before she didn't. And that was one of, I mean, I'm just a big kids person, and when he told me that story, I had to get in the industry. And you know, but that's the sad part, is that how many of that was there. I mean, so there has to be, that has to change in how the food grade deal, it has to change. I mean,
well, and as a consumer, paying attention to what you're buying and understanding that, you know, again, I think the pandemic kind of exposed the power of media and the power of the influence of what people are telling you. And just because somebody says put a drop under your tongue and it'll make you walk upright, doesn't mean that it's going to, right? And so, and just because somebody says their product is the best, make sure you're reading, because what's best for you may not be the best for me or the next person on the block. And I think that plays a big role in cannabis in general, how you're consuming, what you consume. But when I talk about like kitchen quality and food grade quality, it's more and more important to me that companies are paying attention from seed to cradle, that it is, you know, GMP certified, food grade quality, meeting standards, and setting that precedence up front instead of waiting to get caught. You know, go into this knowing that that's where the industry is, and that's where, for the sake of your buyer and your consumer, that's where.
That's why it's so important to have platforms like yours, is because we've seen it. We had a guy come in here and he said, look, I've been using this. He was from North Dakota. He said, I've been using this. It's not helping my knee. And I looked at it and read the bottle, and it said hemp oil seed. I said, that's not CBD. That's hemp oil seed. That's seed. That's oil from the seed. It's not the same thing. It's not? And I said, no, it's not the same thing. I mean, you got to buy what you got to research.
Yeah. And just for consumers to know, you know, people like you and us and your partners are working hard to set that standard of excellence. But I want to thank you guys for what you're doing. I can't believe the pain point that's being solved. I'm excited to make more introductions, because the labor around harvest time is a real concern. I'd love to see co-ops and small rural areas be able to get their hands on equipment like yours, where they can share it and actually make then the harvesting cost effective. I just can't imagine the labor cost for harvesting that they would save in the long run.
Yeah.
So, well, I sure appreciate it. I'm excited to meet face to face. I'll have to reach out to Kirk and say hello as well. But where you guys are going to be at the World Ag Expo, is that right? Are you going to be involved there this year?
Yeah, so we got a booth there. Of course, everything's virtual. But
yeah. When is that? If somebody wants to get in touch, and are you guys doing a panel or a Q&A?
Kirk's been involved with all it. The best thing to do is call Kirk.
Okay, well, good.
I ended up in the shop.
We'll direct everybody to him. And if you guys do need anything or have any questions, they're definitely somebody to follow and watch out for. If you guys need anything outside of, equipment, but you guys, real quick, Toby, you guys also manufacture your equipment in Colorado, right?
Yeah, we manufacture right here. We're USA all the way. We don't buy. We're just USA. We try to make American jobs.
Speaking of our supply chains. Okay, well, thank you very much, you guys. Like, share, follow, join any of our conversations, globalhempassociation.org, or on YouTube, Global Hemp Association. Okay, thank you very much, Toby, and we'll see everybody, I guess, Monday.
Thanks, Mandy.
Thank you. See ya.